Welcome to Alert and Oriented, conversations about God between friends. Join Gary Barkalow and Sam Williamson as we talk about real life with the real God, really. About a week ago, Sam and I were talking, as we do often, several times probably during the week, just out of our friendship and checking up on each other and discussing ideas and what we've been reading. And in the midst of a conversation, we started talking about how we felt, a little bit lethargic, unmotivated, and, in some ways not having much energy, or at least what we used to have. And I don't remember who shared it first, but whoever shared it first, the other one of us said, yeah, me too. That's exactly what I've been feeling and struggling with. And so as we talked about this, it was that one particular day, but then over time, we started sharing with each other that we had talked to others and they were saying the same thing. Maybe using a little different words, but meaning the same thing about how they've been feeling and wondering what it is and why it is and how to go through it. And sometimes what they would tend to say is, I have just never felt back to normal. Before COVID, for instance. A lot of people would kind of use that as a marker, go back to that time. And maybe it's been more recent, but it's sparked a curiosity for Sam and I about this whole thing that we've been experiencing together and we have heard from others. So that's what we wanted to talk about during this time, just our experience with it and what we're hearing from others. So Sam, what about you?
I remember talking to a pastor once on one of our retreats. So, in our calling intensive retreat, we have these very small groups where there's a lot of personal sharing. And I was talking to a pastor who just was lost. And he quoted Marie Antoinette. He said, "Nothing tastes." And I thought that was a great description for where he was at. But I loved the quote because I thought when you and I were talking, it reminded me of sort of what I'm experiencing. Nothing tastes. It's not that I'm depressed. I don't think I'm, but I feel like I can see it from here, or it's not quite dejection, but it's, like you said, melancholy. I'd like to say I'm in a funk. It's sort of like a lack of direction. There's a set of things I like to do. I really like to write my weekly articles. I like to go golfing. I like to spend time on dates with my wife. None of these things sound that good. They each take a little extra energy just to go do. Now, actually, usually when I'm doing them, I'm okay, but just to do it takes a little bit of energy at a time when I don't have much energy. So, I like to golf, but I got to get in the car, get my clubs in the car, drive 20 minutes, and I think, forget it. It's just like dumb, but it's sort of like being in the doldrums, a little down. I don't think I'm thinking negative thoughts. I'm just lethargic is the word you used. I think that's a good word. And I'm amazed at how many people feel the same way when I talk with them. They feel directionless. Like, what am I doing with my life? Why am I here? It's hard to get out of bed. And, it's really funny. But for me, one of the things that's happened is I'm not watching movies. Now, I know you like to watch movies. If I look at a movie and I say, oh, my goodness, it's an hour and 45 minutes, I say, I'm just going to watch a show that's half an hour. I just don't think I can watch an hour and a half movie. Now, I might watch 3 episodes and it'll still be an hour and a half. But even watching a long movie seems like too much work.
Yeah. I that expression, right? Nothing tastes is so good because what I remember was when I had COVID, I lost taste and I still ate, but the food didn't interest me really. And so it's kind of the same thing, right? Like you're saying, I'm still doing things in my life, but they don't interest me that much. In fact, the phrase that comes to me is, and I think this is a little more extreme than what I felt is, I don't care. I don't care to do that. I don't care about that very much. I'm not interested, and And
Yep,
yeah,
yep,
you
yep.
know, I know the things that I should be doing. And I say that in a good way, as far as things that are on my heart to do and I feel like God wants me to do. And I know those things. I haven't forgotten, but I just don't feel much desire, passion, excitement about them anymore. So I'm doing them now, probably not as well, probably not as quickly, but so I haven't lost that. It's just like you were saying, it's the enjoyment, the taste, the desire behind it seems to be very muted, maybe is a way to say it.
Yeah, like everything seems a little boring,
Yeah.
like nothing tastes. It just
Yeah.
doesn't seem, there's no sort of get up and go. Now, if we get up and go, we find it isn't so bad, but it's
Right.
hard to get the energy to get up and go because nothing tastes.
Yeah.
Um,
So
and
yeah, go
so
ahead.
I was going to say, I do think you're mentioning COVID, not just the illness, not just the virus, but the season that we've
Mhm.
had for 2 years, I
Right.
think is the real contributor. I think a huge contributor is just the isolation. Most people I know don't see as many people as they used to see. They used to go to church. You know, people don't go to church as much. They're just not going to church, and then they're watching it online. But watching it online isn't the same as seeing people face to face. I'm still not meeting nearly as many people as I used to before COVID, where we would just go out for coffee and grab, or go out golfing. Honestly, um, I'm just not seeing that. I'm golfing by myself more than I am with other people at the moment. It's just there's more isolation, and I think the isolation is a huge contributor to the doldrums that we're in.
Yeah.
Nothing
And,
takes.
and when you say that, I wonder about where my mind goes in a category is perhaps we're not just doing as many social things. There's one-on-ones, but then there's the social things, right? Where you're just with some other people just to laugh, enjoy something, and it does feel like that's really come down. Whether people are not used to being with people anymore after a year and a half of that, or it just feels like you said in the beginning, it feels so inconvenient now. So why would I do that? It's interesting today on the radio. I was running an errand and I turned on the radio and it was Dr. Tony Evans speaking. It was a segment from one of his sermons, as so many of those are. And it really kind of captured me as I was listening to it. And I was actually, I tried calling you first and you didn't pick up. You sent me into voicemail. So I turned on the radio and I enjoyed Dr. Tony Evans. I couldn't enjoy you. One of the things he said that I thought was really interesting is he said, now this is going to your comment about COVID. And there was COVID, the virus, but then there was COVID, the season.
Yeah.
But one of the things he said was, that, let me just find this really quickly here. Well, it was just this idea. Oh, he said, the death of truth. He's speaking about our culture. He said, there's been a death of truth in our culture. And he said, the death of truth has led to the breakdown of our cultural immune system.
Huh.
And first of all, on that point alone, I thought that was really fascinating, right? Because it's like our culture is vulnerable to every bad idea now. Like the cultural immune system has been destroyed because we walked away from truth. So I did think, okay, we have our body's immune system, and perhaps it is a little weaker than it used to be after fighting through COVID and all the other just regular flus that come along, because they said our immune system is so untrained after all that isolation that things are going to hit us harder. But then I thought, I think maybe partly what I feel as we've described it is what we're seeing happen in our culture. The culture's immune system being down is affecting me as well. Yeah, I'm just looking, as you're saying, what are possible causes of feeling these things, because it's almost hard to define what I've been feeling lately. And as other people try to describe it, they have a hard time describing it.
No,
And
I think what you're hitting is really good. I mean, because the last podcast we talked about how do we just live in these times that are unprecedented. I don't think we use the word unprecedented, but they are unprecedented. The quote that you gave that I still love, which is things that used to be unthinkable are now unquestionable. And so along the lines, there is a kind of despair I experience, or a hopelessness, just in the politics, in the theology, in the philosophy, in the lifestyle. I sort of think it's happening so fast, so quickly, I don't quite know what to do. And there's a little bit of hopelessness in me of, is it hopeless? It's confusion. What do I do? You know, and I don't know. I think along the lines of that. So this is a really good segue, even though everybody, remember, Gary and I do not script this out. We really don't. So if Gary says something that's going to throw me off into a tangent, or I'll throw him in, but along the lines of the truth, you know, that we're losing, and sort of the confusion about we don't know what to do, I feel like there is a sense of purposelessness. We almost don't know what to do. And there's this quote that I love from Dorothy Sayers, who's this woman I just love. She was a contemporary of Lewis's. She was a professor at Oxford. She was a friend of C.S. Lewis's. They were good acquaintances, but she wrote this. She said, in the world, it's called tolerance, but in hell, it's called despair. This is the sin that believes in nothing, cares for nothing, seeks to know nothing, enjoys nothing, finds purpose in nothing, lives for nothing, but remains alive simply because there's nothing for which it will die. I love that.
Yeah. It
stays alive, not because there's a purpose, but the exact opposite, because there's nothing for which it will die. I feel like God doesn't want us to have that kind of despair. I think that, I mean, we're not moving to talk about solutions, but I think a real solution is to have a purpose. It's a purpose that does know something. It does believe something. It does care for something. It does seek to know more of that. It enjoys things. It finds purpose. It finds such a purpose that there's something we would die for. That wakes me up. That shakes me out of despair.
Therefore, we would live for it as well. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. That's right. I'll live for it, but I'd be willing to die for it.
Yeah.
You know, as opposed to the despair that says there's nothing I would die for, which means nothing tastes.
I think that's really true. And so when you said throwing me off, let me throw you off, I did think, you know, that makes me remember times when I lost my motivation because something threw me off my game, to use that expression, right? You know how things work, you know how you're going to do it, and then something drastically changes, you're thrown off your game. And I do think this feels like a time of being thrown off our game because things are so different now. Right? We're not sure what to do with them. Yeah.
So Jesus said, there's times are going to be hard. And of course, when we think of times being hard, it's, you know, people burning us at the stake. And, you know, there's, you know, the big games in the Roman Colosseum where they're burning Christians or whatever. But I think times of melancholy and despair are sometimes just shake me just as much. I think it was Chambers who says, we love to be up in the mountain of transfiguration. We see the glory of God. We see all these big things, but God always brings us back into the valley after the glory of the transfiguration. So I feel like I'm in the valley right now. And this is where the truth of God is going to be manifest in my life, or it's not. And am I willing to let it be manifest?
Yeah. So, okay. So speaking of that, you know, as you and I have been talking now for a couple of weeks about this, just our own personal experience in our life with others, with God, with ministry, you know, I've been thinking through as you have. So what do I do with this? You know, is this just, well, it's the way it is, just live in it? Or, and we both know if this feels like a hindrance to, you know, pursuing God and pursuing others and pursuing what God's put in our heart, then obviously we should not stay here. There's something that needs to be pushed out of the way. So we've been thinking about, what do we do with this? And so here's some of my thoughts. And Sam, you know, we've talked about this. I'm not presenting these as answers. I'm just saying, here's what my current thoughts are about this. Yeah. And as I've talked to others as well, and I thought, and you just mentioned it, this is what made me think of it, is what we do know is truth. And I think remember years ago, a mentor in my life said, whenever you're confused or in a dark place, always go with what God's already shown you.
Hmm.
You know, you're in a place where you're not going to like discover any more truth, revelation. Just stay with what you have right now. And I think, okay, what is true? What do I know about my life, the life of Christ in me, what he promised to do, how he would change me, what his life would be like in me. And even though I can look at it and say, okay, you must have stopped doing this because it doesn't feel like this is true, but to hang on to it, that there's something else that's in the way of me seeing it, experiencing it. So hang on to what I do know about my life and his life in me. Another is, and this is a big one, this is how we started. It's talking it out with someone else. Because when I know when I deal with something, I struggle with something, it is gigantic until I talk to somebody like you and I talk about it. And I realize, yeah, it's just not that big of a deal. It's something to fight. It's something to get over. It's something to push out of the way. But it's not as big as I felt like it was. So I think just talking this out with somebody, hey, here's what's going on with me. Here's the, state of my heart right now, my life. I just find that very powerful. And that's something, you and I do quite a bit. And in a sense, that's what we're kind of doing right now.
So I agree with both of your comments, and clinging to truth, but also friendship. As I was thinking about this topic, I just was reminded of two Lord of the Rings passages, it's not scripture. I know I quoted a lot, but it is not scripture.
Well, it's a literature passage. Okay.
Okay, whatever. In terms of truth, there's a time where Samwise, he has he's sort of lost his master. He's been alone. They've come through this, but he's despairing. He doesn't think they can do this. And then one night, as he's laying watch, he looks up and he sees the northern star. They're in Moria, that dark, dark, dark place. It's a hopeless mission. But it says, the beauty of the star smote his heart, and hope returned to him. For like a shaft, clear and cold, the thought pierced him that in the end, the shadow was only a small and passing thing, and that there was light and high beauty forever.
Yeah.
And for a moment, his own fate and even his master's ceased to trouble him. That's sort of your idea about truth. There is a truth. And like right now we're in a shadow. I think we're in a shadow. Going back to your lack of truth, people not clinging to truth.
Right.
But there is a bigger truth out there that will never be put out by this shadow. And I am always moved by that story of Sam. It's sort of like he remembers this truth. It's just a star, but just that star gives him hope. So that's the truth. And then the other thing, it's amazing. We did not script this, but Gary and I are both thinking along the same lines. This is the companionship. I'm thinking of Theoden in The Lord of the Rings, who, when we come upon him, he is just this shadow of a man. And Gandalf comes to him, and Gandalf says, too long have you sat in shadows and trusted to the twisted tales and crooked promptings, because he's been listening to Wormtongue. You've listened to those and you've trusted those. So Gandalf says, come on outside. When he gets out, Theoden says, it's not so dark here. No, said Gandalf, nor does age lie so heavily on your shoulders as you would think. Cast aside your prop, meaning you've been leaning on this crutch. Theoden needed the friend in Gandalf to say, quit listening to those twisted tales. And Theoden needed the Gandalf to come along and said, you're not doing as bad as you think. You're not as old as you think. You're not as energyless as you think. You're not as purposeless as you think. You have missions to do. You have battles to fight. And Theoden wakes up, and Theoden pulls his sword out and he says, arise, Aerling. I don't remember what they're called, Aerlingas or something. And everybody jumps up. But it was Gandalf waking up Theoden, who wakes up the whole kingdom. And I think sometimes that's what we need in our lives. We need friends who say, arise, quit listening to those tales. There's deeds to be done. And that's what I think we need sometimes.
Yeah. Boy, that's powerful. That's really a powerful story, and what an amazing job Tolkien did, getting these truths across. That's amazing.
And, I think sometimes this sounds very unspiritual. I think sometimes we just need a dinner with a friend, a nice glass of wine. I love the story of Elijah, who's not inspired. He's depressed. He's tried to convert the kingdom of Israel and they haven't converted. So he gives up his ministry. He goes to a town and he dismisses his servant, which was the same as saying, I'm retiring, I'm done. And he's going to go down and he sleeps and an angel comes up to him and just touches him and says, arise and eat. I've always thought, this angel doesn't give him a sermon. This angel doesn't say, hope in the Lord. This angel doesn't say, cast aside your despair. The angel touches him, because we need human touch. He cooks him dinner. This is the spiritual answer from an angel of God for a depressed man. He touches him and he cooks him dinner. And I think for us, sometimes we just need to get up and walk around the block or go out to dinner with a friend. It's not bad. God has made us physical creatures, and it's okay to do that. I don't think we should feel guilty about it.
Yeah, that's really good. With that, I ran across a passage, if you will, from Oswald Chambers, his writing, a passage from his writings. And he said something, and I've read this like 4 or 5 times today. I'd read it, think about it, reread it, think about it, walk away from it, come back, think about it, read it again. So let me read you what he said. He said, and it's so funny, Sam, I don't remember ever reading this before, and I know I've gone through, every year I go through these. If you are going through a time of discouragement, there is a big personal enlargement ahead. You say, God is up to something. He's got something coming for you, and it's good. But then he says a little bit later on, he said, I can be so rich in poverty, so rich in the consciousness that I am nobody, that I will never be a disciple of Jesus. Okay, pause for a second. Okay. So he's just saying we can get to that point of I'm nobody, and we really won't be a true disciple of Jesus if we stay in that. And then he says, he goes on and he says, and I can be so rich in the consciousness that I am somebody that I shall never be a disciple. Mm. Am I willing to be destitute of the sense that I am destitute? This is where discouragement comes in. And I it was one of those things where I'm going, wow, I don't know if I'm getting what he's saying. And I'm not completely convinced I am. But I think we can be in this place that we're describing, which again, we're saying it's not depression. It's not necessarily deep discouragement, but there's something off. It's like just a level below, I'm doing okay. I'm not doing, And I thought it's just easy to stay in that place. I am destitute. And he's just saying, don't. You need to be destitute of being destitute, right? You walk out of that and you say, no, I won't live here. I am a disciple of Christ, kind of going back to the truth and having someone call us out and saying, this place that you're in, it's not your abiding place. Don't abide in that place that you're feeling right now.
Gary, that's very convicting. Thanks a lot. What it reminds me of is, when I'm feeling destitute or discouraged or whatever, I am highly aware of it. And I sort of feel sorry for myself. There's sort of like a little bit of self-pity. Poor me. And, just you're saying I need to be destitute of being destitute. I sort of have to reject it. I am embarrassed. If you ever said, Sam, you're filled with self-pity, I'd go, oh my goodness, I am so mortified, and you saw that. But it is, to me, as you're saying that, I sort of feel like some of my despondency is a kind of just poor me, self-pity. that I don't want.
Yeah.
I really don't want for my life.
Okay. So with that, yeah, I'm with you with that. And it's easy to stay there because it can feel almost comforting. Like I deserve
You bet it can.
right?
Poor me. Everybody's against me. No one understands me.
Right. So what he says, and I stopped here, but that's just interesting that you said that, because he finishes with this idea, and this is August 18th was this passage out of his writing. He said, discouragement is disenchantment with self-love. And self-love may be love of my devotion to Jesus. So he's saying we can be really discouraged when we're disenchanted with our self-love. In other words, I'm not loving myself very well anymore, right? I am such a disappointment. And and then he says, but you can also be, self-love can be also that you just simply love the way that you think you're devoted to Jesus. It's not Jesus you're devoted to. It's
right. You're devoted to yourself.
Devotion to him, which you've mentioned many times in your writings and different times talking. We're in love with being in love with Jesus, but we're not really in love with him. He's not the object of it. It's just our devotion. And we have to be so careful with that. And one of the things you and I talked about is asking the question when we're in a place like this, why? And not looking for a quick answer, but just, God, why am I like this? Why am I feeling like this? What is this about? What could you be up to in this? Am I doing this to myself, and why? I mean, just those why questions, right? I think God says, let's go deeper, just as you were talking about, because there's something to be revealed, maybe something to be healed, something to be walked away from.
And I think one of the best ways to do those questions of yourself is to do it with a friend.
Yes.
Because you and I keep talking about how we're both blind. Now, everybody we know is blind to our weaknesses, and we need a friend to point it out. But we are blind to our strengths. I will say, Gary, that was brilliant. And you're sitting here thinking, well, it's just obvious. Well, it wasn't obvious to me. You had something, and you don't realize that it's brilliant unless I say it to you. You're blind to your strengths as well as to your weaknesses. And I am too, and everybody is. And when we're in the middle of some of these times where we just have to ask ourselves, why am I so down? Why am I so purposeless? Why am I so filled with self-pity? I do need a friend to help me brainstorm that, to get to the real truth.
Right. And yes, I'm with you completely. That's what we were trying to do with each other, as in this current conversation and topic.
Frankly, this current conversation is encouraging to me. I mean, it's funny, we're talking about despair and I'm encouraged.
Yeah. Well, and then I was just going to add to what you just said, the list of, what a friend does for another friend is, and then pray for them. Sometimes it's with them out loud in front of them. And sometimes it's not. Sometimes that's not the place for that. It's just knowing that someone is praying for me and asking, God to, maybe reveal something through me to that person if they would want to do that, or just reveal it to them.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I have one other idea, and this is from Saint Mark Twain, who, of course, was not a saint, but I read just a few months ago a quote that he made, and I could find the book, but I can't remember off the top of my head. But he said this. He said, so basically the point is, try something. He said, 20 years from now, you will be more disappointed by the things you didn't do than by the things you did do. So throw off the bow lines, sail away from the safe harbor, catch the trade winds in your sails, explore, dream, discover. I think we all need that a little bit. We need to sort of get out of the safe harbor. I love the line, 20 years from now, I'm going to look back and I'm going to be more disappointed that I didn't try more things. I didn't do more things. I didn't go out with more friends. I didn't do something.
Yeah.
Than ever I did something and it was sort of a mistake,
Yeah.
So
you're saying, what you're
try
saying
something
in the context of this topic right? When we feel like we don't want to do anything, we don't care, nothing tastes.
Yeah.
It's maybe push out and try something.
Yeah.
Right. Even if our normally experienced motivation isn't there.
And it can be just invite a few friends over for a barbecue. It can take up a new sport. It's, do something bold and dangerous. I don't know what it is, but I think God likes an adventurous spirit in us. And I would say that right now we've all sort of cocooned down and hunkered down. And I don't think we have to. I think sort of like Sam Ganji saw that star up there and he says, all of a sudden I have hope again. I can do something.
Yeah.
Let's see the star and say, we can do something. We don't have to be held back by what we see around us.
Yeah. That's really good.
And I was really serious, Gary. Having this discussion with you is energizing for me. And I think this kind of thing is what we all need. Grab some friends, play cornhole, drink a beer, just talk about life and encouragement and some truths that you've had in your life. And I think it'll wake everybody up.
Yeah. So thank you everyone for joining us, and
see you next week.
We'll see you next week.
Thanks for listening. Please join us by following this podcast or liking it, and visit our websites, thenobleheart.com and beliefsoftheheart.com for more resources in living the eternal life with God today. You'll find articles, videos, and online classes. See you next week.